For months, we have covered on this show the number of African Americans who have been beaten and killed by police. It is a long line. We can talk about Eric Garner. We can talk about Mike Brown, Victor White III. We can talk about John Crawford, Rakia Boyd, Aiyana Jones. The list goes on and on. Now there's a new video. Last week, out of Philadelphia, cops beating 22-year-old Tyree Carroll while riding his bike the wrong way down a one-way street. You see the video there. You have what looks like at least 4 police officers. He is on the ground, motionless, and they are repeatedly punching him, beating him. And police said Carroll had 5.3 grams of crack cocaine on him. He now faces assault and drug-related charges. But they still can't explain why the vicious beating. Also in Cleveland, still no justice for 12-year-old Tamir Rice, shot and killed by police there in November. A judge dismisses a call for the arrest of the police officer involved. In that particular case, what happened was citizens there were able to utilize a state law that allowed them to present evidence, and that a judge there could issue arrest warrant for the officers involved in the death of Tamir Rice, but that judge has declined to do so. And on Wednesday, Jonathan Sanders, a father of 2, choked to death by a Mississippi cop after being pulled off of a horse. He was choked with a flashlight. Joining the panel, Dr. Cleo Monago, behavioral health expert, Monique Presley, principal of the Presley Law Firm, and Ray Baker of Ray Baker Media. Folks, it's very interesting. I will hear critics who will say, you guys keep highlighting these stories as opposed to, there's so many great cops out here. Again, what we are seeing repeatedly is that you have police officers who have a Wild West mentality. And I still believe as long as you have cops who are not disciplined, who are not indicted, who don't go to prison, there's this belief they can do whatever they want to without any repercussions. And we're going to see more and more videos that I've been promising. We're going to see more and more because it happens a lot. And now with cameras, we get to see it.
Well, I just want to reiterate, I've said so much about this, I don't know what else to say, except for that we don't see every time this happens. We only see it when there is a camera. As someone who's working in law enforcement, trust me, most of them do not make the camera or the news or a smartphone, and it's worse than we believe. So I agree with you that there should be something done that where there's swift justice when someone is killed like this. But how many times do you want to hear me say that?
We're seeing less and less provocation, and people are ending up dead. So it used to be the case where things like this would happen. They would at least be able to say that the person was armed, or that they suspected that the person was armed, or that there was a real struggle before use of deadly force was necessary. But now we're finding, as you say, through poor police tactics, but also through just this kind of increased anxiety level from police officers, that the minute they're in an altercation, they're using the maximum amount of force.
Joe Serpico, of course, the movie Serpico, he uncovered massive corruption in the New York Police Department. He wrote, after the Eric Garner case, I believe it was for the New York Daily News, he penned a guest column. And to your point, he said, we used to have to carry a separate gun, and we would throw the gun down or throw a knife down. He said, hell, we don't need that now. He said, all a police officer has to do is say, my life was in danger. And the way the law is written, we give so much leeway, Ray, to that police officer where they pretty much can do whatever they want, and they know I'm getting off.
Absolutely, and what we're finding is more examples of hypocrisy here in the United States. If we're going to use our criminal justice system as a place of deterrent from certain behavior for everyday citizens like the 4 of us here, but yet the rules are different for law enforcement officials, that's complete inconsistency, and it's probable cause for so many citizens rightly to be frustrated.
Well, one idea I just want to make sure we're clear on, because I think you mentioned something about an increase. It's not an increase. Like I've said many times on this,
it's an increase in us seeing the videos.
It's an increase in us seeing the videos. These attitudes and that have led to the knee-jerk reaction that has led to the maiming and killing of particularly young black men has not increased or been worse. It's always been like this.
What I think we're seeing an increase in is the incidence of use of deadly force where they cannot substantiate that there was a weapon involved, or where there was an altercation, or where there really was an imminent fear. Just in terms of the numbers of African Americans, at least that we can document through data, who were dying at the hands of police officers, that's the number that's increasing. I'm not saying that when we weren't taking good data that the number wasn't terrible.
For a long time,
we
weren't taking any data at all. Do you remember Daryl Gates? Anybody remember Daryl Gates?
Mm-hmm.
He used to be the head of the police department in Los Angeles. And in the 60s and 70s, he was one of the people that became most known for the chokehold. They were choking and killing naked black men who didn't have no blatant weapon. Some people think the black penis is a weapon. That's another conversation. But they were being killed. It was happening over and over and over again. And my point again is that this is not an onslaught. This is not new. The excuses are not new. Matter of fact, Daryl Gates said the reason that so many this was a quote,
right,
was a paraphrase. He said the reason that so many black men were dying was because black people were not normal physically.
Right.
Biologically, we were made differently, which is why we tended to die from the chokehold. And he went to lunch. I mean, there were no repercussions.
Also, the weekend, the officer who choked to death Eric Garner, a story was done on him where he said that he can't wait to get back on the force. But this is also another example of why people are critical of the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. We all saw the video. The Staten Island DA did not indict this police officer, took it to the grand jury. And so here's this cop, he's waiting to get back on the job, and folks are asking DOJ, where are you? Does it actually take this long for the Department of Justice to bring civil rights charges against this police officer? What more needs to be done? And I believe, though, I understand from a community standpoint, there's a belief that, look, we need action.
But he shouldn't be expecting to get back on the job, and it doesn't take the DOJ. The DOJ can't take away his job. That's up to the local police department and the mayor's office, and he used a procedure that he was not supposed to use. Even if they couldn't get him criminally indicted or to go to jail, he still should have already lost his job. The city is going to end up paying handsomely for his actions.
The man has a history. This wasn't his first incident.
But the whole point I'm making about DOJ is that DOJ, they're investigating. Folks are saying, okay, how long is this going to take? Is it going to take 2-3 years for the Department of Justice to make a decision whether or not they should file civil rights charges against this guy? And I think it's a legitimate question. How long should it take? I mean, my goodness.
And it's not likely to happen. That's the reality.
All right, hold tight 1 second, folks. Welcome back to News 1 Now on TV 1. David Frum, you want to make a comment after Howard made his point, and I understand. I get when you said why you tweeted what you did and what you were trying to decode. The issue for me is that in the moment of this greatness, introducing something else that had nothing to do with it, that's why I say, okay, I need to understand what you're talking about, and I am expanding this because I'm looking at literally the hate that she is getting because of how she looks, and she's an absolutely gorgeous, fine woman.
Yes. Well, Howard said something that was really interesting. It really made me think. You know, it's true. As a society, we're not very serious about steroids. We're serious about if you're caught, then the house falls on you. But we don't really want to know. And that is true across a wide range of sports, and it's true for men and women. And we expect athletes to do things that the human body can't on its own, no matter how highly trained do. Take injuries in a way that the human body can't do. And we play sports that expose people to injuries that the human body can't take, except for a short time if it's sustained by these artificial enhancements. Steroids are important, and you know there have been periodic attempts to rouse the nation's consciousness about them, and the world's. But mostly we look the other way.
Well, I would think, Zena, that the reporter wanted to focus on steroids, they would have. I don't get the sense that's what the story was about.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I think I'm the only professional tennis player that played on this.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
But I just want to.
My 3.5 doesn't count.
You guys have no idea how hard it is to do what she's doing right now mentally.
Yes.
Forget about the physical, mentally. I mean, this girl played the Australian Open. I was actually there. I knew she was a little sick. She won the U.S. Open. And then we watched the French Open. Everyone in the world could see that she was sick. Mentally, still pulled it out. She's down against Heather Watson. Looks like she's not going to come back in the Wimbledon. Comes back, wins that match, and then wins Wimbledon. Now she has a chance to win a Grand Slam. Who's Steffi Graf, who we have not talked about on this conversation, that I played with. What even then people were saying she was possibly on steroids. So every time a top tennis player is at the max of doing something they're supposed to, that has a chance to do or break history, they have to be cheating. Like, we got to get away from that and realize what's going on. We have the opportunity for kids to actually see history, these young kids being made if she wins the championship in New York. But instead, we're on this conversation and talking about the way she looks and possible steroids.
But Zena, what angers me, though, is the fact that with all of the greatness you just talked about, that a woman who she's beaten 17 out of the last 21 times makes twice as much money as she does when it comes to endorsements, when in any other sport, Michael Jordan made more money than any other basketball player because he was the best. All right? LeBron right now is #1. Same thing if you're in baseball, same thing if you're in football, but somehow in tennis, oh no, well, she don't really fit the standard of beauty, and that's crazy. There's no reason in the world, and there's something else at play when Madison Avenue says, Serena, I know you're the best, but we're going to pay this woman over here because her look is different. That is about looks. That is not about skill set.
And let's not forget, Serena speaks a couple of different languages. She's very diverse, from any way you look at it. She has a ton of businesses. Serena is worried about history, not the fact of the way that people think that she looked. I think, let's go back to what happened in Indian Wells. She went back after years in calling we're not going to say the word, but I've been there. I understand it. For her to forgive, that's why I believe she's at the moment that she's at right now, because she's been able to forgive all the negative criticism that people put on her to do something that I feel that God has given her the opportunity to be the best female athlete we've ever seen in this day and time.
Folks, I'm absolutely out of time. David Frum, Zena Garrison, Howard Bryant, Cleo Monago, Monique Presley, Ray Baker. So appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Back on News One Now on TV One in the moment. Welcome back to News One Now. We're talking about Serena Williams, one of the greatest athletes of our time. We're chatting with Zena Garrison, retired tennis great, also ESPN writer, tennis expert Howard Bryant. Also joining us in the studio, David Frum from The Atlantic, and of course our panel, Cleo Monago, Monique Presley, and Ray Baker, Dr. Cleo Monago, Ray Baker. The reason I think this body image story is critically important, the tweet of J.K. Rowling, the comments that people are making, a lot of the hateful comments, is because Venus Williams and Serena Williams have had to deal with this from day one. There are numerous fit athletes in tennis, but the distinction between them, they're black women. Zena Garrison, you know this well. There were critics of you in terms of how you look. Shonda Rubin has faced that as well. And a lot of this is because in this country, whether we want to be honest with ourselves or not, the image of beauty in America has been that of a blonde, blue-eyed white woman. And when you have these women, phenomenal athletes, all of a sudden the images of monkeys and chimpanzees and apes and all these crazy things come up. And that comes to how we look at beauty in America.
Yeah, it's actually really, it's actually unbelievably ridiculous, but it is something you have to deal with. As you're training or coming up to be a professional tennis player, it's one that, we're taught at a very young age that these are things that you have to deal with. I remember never having a nice looking picture of myself when I was playing, but then you would see someone like Chrissy, who always had a great picture. Martina's pictures sometimes came out very strong looking. And it's, and this actually goes back to the point where you talk about dealing with the endorsements. And then I would always have people come up to me and say, oh my goodness, you don't look anything like you do on the courts. Well, those pictures were chosen. I am who I am. I was very blessed that God gave me the body. And let's be real about this. I mean, back in the very old days when we came over here from Africa, I mean, the women were considered very strongly built. It's just in our genes. We don't have to lift weights a lot to pump up. Sometimes we have a tendency to not pump up as much as people think you do because our muscles are automatically, they develop very quickly.
Monique, and Cleo, we hear this stuff when it comes to First Lady Michelle Obama, and I mean, I've heard folks say stuff, and you going, really? Really?
Well, my concern, as usual, is the impact all this stuff has on us, and in this instance, black women. Because I expect white racism to occur. That's a redundant part of my life and all of our lives in this country. I was just concerned, and am concerned about the impact on Serena and Zena, because Serena is one of the baddest, good bad, Michael Jackson bad, good bad is tennis player ever walked the planet, and she should be able to just enjoy that, and being in the sun with her genius. But she has to deal with being dehumanized because of racism. And I'm just concerned that a lot of black women are tortured by this because we don't tell our children that they live in a racist society and prepare them for this so they can deflect this crap and go on to love themselves.
Monique?
Look, Still I Rise was not written because of all of the easy times that we've gone through, because life is some sort of crystal stair. It's not just hard for Venus and Serena. Black women have been dealing with this for hundreds of years, but what I see in this story and what I hear from some of the comments is racism and sexism. I feel sorry for the Caucasian woman in the New York Times story who could be a really great tennis player, but she'd rather look like a woman, and has a coach who thinks that a woman means that you can't have the muscles that it takes to play professional sports and actually win. That means that she's been marginalized in a craft where she could actually be good.
Money, she can still get paid.
A quick
Right. Well, she get paid less than the moment she keep kicking her behind Sharapova.
I'm glad,
Go ahead,
I'm glad
Ray.
Monique spoke before I did, because I think that this is the whole aesthetic of the conversation we're having is sexist, right? And it's a confluence of racism and sexism. And what we're seeing, particularly when we mention this, is men policing the bodies of women, and this idea of what a woman has to look like. Hey, I want to do this, but I still want to be a woman. I'm not equipped to now have this conversation, so I defer to Monique. But us policing a woman's body is flawed.
I want to go, David.
Did anybody actually have the chance to see Serena in her championship ball dress? I think she looks pretty much like a woman.
No, absolutely.
Exactly.
And
Always gorgeous.
right. Hold tight. Hold on one second. I want to. So this is the photo of her in the ball gown. That look like a woman to me right there. That's a grown woman.
She looks like a woman when she's on the court doing the backhand
no.
She looks like a woman the whole time.
I want to go to David on this one here, David, because David, his was interesting. Again, I'm talking about this notion of standard of beauty. Put up the photo of Serena at the U.S. Open about a decade ago. Okay. Now, here's what's interesting, David. Anybody who's, first of all, I was running blackamericaweb.com when we put those photos up. It shut the website down. No. You don't understand. I was running the site. I couldn't log on for 4 hours because of the photo. But what's amazing, David, is that in America, Kim Kardashian celebrated Serena's butt is real, Kim is fake. Okay, all of Serena's real, she's fake. But for some reason, in America, that's not considered the standard of beauty. But if that was a white woman with a body like that, oh my gosh, she'd be celebrated.
Look, one of the things that I think happens in this conversation, when you're talking about athletes who are people who receive enormous adulation and huge wealth in our society, that because they become repositories for they become screens on which people project so many beliefs and hopes and hurts and history, that it makes it hard to answer a simple question like, this person, this athlete who is this great competitor in this global event, what are they doing? Are they playing fair or not? And that becomes what has happened is this is seen through a screen of so much historical trauma that you lose sight of the actual person.
What do you mean by historical trauma? What historical trauma?
Well, because you reference a couple of times the First Lady, and she has been the recipient of a lot of abusive comments. I mean, I worked in a White House.
Similar comments made about Serena Williams.
Right. Well, yes and no. But look, I've worked in a White House, I think, and I've written often. I think that she's been one of the most successful first ladies. It's a very difficult job, and she understands how to do it. But because if you make everything like everything else, and I'm here to talk about what I wrote. When you say, you know, when you're trying to understand, is the sport of tennis on the level? Are there problems in tennis? And to then say, we're going to move this conversation to one about how millions of women are seen, that you lose sight of the person who's at the center of the story.
No.
Actually, the center of the story is, if you're talking about the sport being on the level, then I think that it's a very different conversation, because one, that's not what that New York Times story was about. That's what you want to talk about, which is fine, which is completely appropriate if that's what you want to do. However, I don't hear a lot of people talking about Ronda Rousey being on steroids and she's an MMA fighter. Or what about Samantha Stosur, who is as big as Serena, or someone like Angelique Kerber, who's also a really, really well put together player. I hear this about Serena Williams. Maybe it's because she wins all the time, but I think that Roland's actually talking about something else, which is standard of beauty. It's not simply the PED conversation. It's also calling somebody an ape. And when you're at Wimbledon, when I saw Serena beat Radwanska in the 2012 final. I was at the Heather Watson match. I was at the Azarenka match just a few days ago. And when you're at those matches, you feel the difference. You feel from the predominantly white crowd, and Zena knows this because she's been on the stage, when a black woman hits a tennis ball, you can see the reaction, which is very, very different from the way a white woman hits the ball with the same amount of power and the same grunting and the same ferocity. But it's almost as though, I remember 2012 specifically, it was almost as though there was a pity in the crowd that these poor young girls had no chance against this beast. And that was you could feel it. It was palpable. And what was really interesting about it is that Serena doesn't even hit the ball the hardest. It's simply the reaction. It's the visceral of it.
I got to go to a break, and we're going to come back. We'll finish our conversation. I got to squeeze in 2 more breaks, but we'll do so. News 1 Now, TV 1.